We've all been there, waiting for summer to end, dreaming of cooler days, and maybe wondering if autumn will ever arrive. If you find yourself dreading the heat and humidity of summer, just be glad that you didn't live in the Middle Ages. When the sun beat down on medieval Europe, it wasn't just hot, it was dangerous. Hi everyone, welcome to Life Noggin. Even ancient Egyptians wore hats with brims. And in the Middle Ages, it was women of higher social standing who wore those hats, and carried parasols to shield themselves from direct sunlight. In fact, for elite women, staying pale was a sign of beauty and wealth, since it meant they had the resources to stay indoors instead of working outside in the sun. We know that mosquitoes and fleas played a role in spreading deadly diseases like malaria and the plague. But there were also other annoying and sometimes dangerous insects. Horseflies were a nuisance because their bites could become infected and even cause blindness. Ticks could transmit disease, and ants were aggressive if disturbed. Swimming was also risky, since few people knew how to swim. Plagues, which were outbreaks of infectious diseases, were also prevalent during the hottest months of the year. And that's something we can take away from medieval people. Like the three little pigs, medieval people had to deal with a big bad wolf. And in this case, the wolf was the summer. If you need a break from the heat, why not learn something new? As always, thank you for watching, and don't forget to keep on thinking. The sun was hot, farms needed tending, fires needed watching, and people needed protecting. It wasn't easy being alive back then, but the people of the Middle Ages managed to survive, thanks to their ingenuity and ability to adapt. So the next time you feel like the summer is too hot, or the humidity is too sticky, just remember, it could have been much worse. You could have been around during the Middle Ages. They might not have had air conditioning, but they did have window screens. These were made from flax or hemp and were attached to windows to keep bugs out. Although they weren't foolproof, since medieval people still reported dealing with flies and mosquitoes. And while many of their methods of dealing with the heat seem strange to us now, like the idea of exposing yourself to more heat to cool down, some of their ideas aren't so far from our own. One medieval remedy for sunburn was to cover yourself in oil, which sounds weird, but sunscreen tends to have oil-based formulas too. The second wave of the plague pandemic, which lasted from 1346 to 1353, saw temperatures peak during the summer, and that might not have been a coincidence. Medieval physicians noted that the heat and dryness of summer contributed to bad air, or miasma, which caused plague outbreaks. Of course, they were wrong about bad air, but they were right about the heat. Hot, dry weather can facilitate the spread of infections and worsen public health conditions. A lesson we're still learning today as we try to manage seasonal diseases. Most medieval people couldn't swim, and even those who could were often exhausted from working in the heat. This made summer the deadliest time for drowning. In fact, during the hot summer of 1258, the English port of Sandwich saw at least 18 accidental drownings. One could say that all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, but in the Middle Ages, it might make Jack a drowned boy. To deal with these biting pests, medieval people turned to a variety of repellents, including burning sulfur, which could ward off flies and fleas, or soaking rags in vinegar and hanging them up to repel ants. Lavender was also believed to be effective at repelling certain insects, so it was often grown near homes or used in sachets to help keep pests away. Peasants, on the other hand, had no such luxury. Snakes were seen as evil creatures that could strike and kill. Their presence was especially feared in places like England, where poisonous adders were common. During the summer months, there were more accidents. For instance, with construction work picking up after winter, more people fell from scaffolding and suffered serious injuries. At the same time, farm work increased, and this meant that more people were exposed to dangerous animals and machinery. In fact, the scythe, a tool used to harvest crops, was responsible for many injuries and deaths. In the 18th century, when farm work picked up, the rate of accidental deaths doubled. This was because scythes could be as tall as the user and sometimes had sharp enough blades to take a finger or two off. To protect themselves, medieval people carried snake sticks, which were long poles with hooks used to grab snakes and then toss them away. There were even festivals dedicated to killing snakes. It's like the one held in the village of Ashbow Kingham in Suffolk, England, which reportedly saw villagers kill hundreds of snakes and collect a bounty. Not only did they have to work in the sun, they couldn't afford sunscreen. So over time, their skin became darker and more tanned than their upper-class counterparts. As a result, having darker skin became a sign of low social status. Today we're talking about what it was really like to experience summer in the Middle Ages. Many recipes for creams and ointments included ingredients like white lead acetate, which can lead to lead poisoning. That's because the summer heat turned dry, meaning that it was easy for fires to ignite and spread. Once they started, they could quickly get out of control. During the summer, lightning was common, and people often left fires unattended while they went to work in the fields. And when houses were built with timber frames and thatched roofs, it wasn't long before a fire got out of control. In fact, royal ordinances from the 13th century required every citizen to have a water pot next to their door in case a fire broke out, illustrating how serious a threat fires were. There were also water carriers who went around ringing bells and shouting for people to come and help carry water. Everyone was responsible for protecting the community from fire. Lead acetate is colorless and odorless, so it's difficult to detect in creams or ointments, but eating even small amounts can be fatal. Lead poisoning symptoms are also subtle in the beginning, including headaches, weakness, and abdominal pain, and can worsen over time to include anemia, insomnia, and even psychosis. Despite the risks, people in the Middle Ages continued to use white lead for centuries, highlighting the lengths to which they went to conform to beauty standards. Let's talk about what medieval people understood about how summer affected the human body. In medieval times, the prevailing theory of medicine was known as humorism, or humoral theory. According to this theory, the human body was governed by 4 fluids or humors: blood, phlegm, yellow, and black bile. The balance of these fluids determined your health, so illness resulted when there was too much or too little of one of them. And according to this theory, summer increased the amount of yellow bile, which was considered hot and dry. So summer heat was believed to cause fevers and irritability, meaning that summer wasn't just hot, it was potentially dangerous to your health. Given this, it's no surprise that medieval medicine attempted to treat summer ailments by cooling or drying out the body. And one way they did this was through balms for sunburn. For instance, the Balm of Curry, a medieval English cookbook, advised mixing flowers such as roses, meal or lavender with vinegar and flour to make a paste that could be applied to sunburn. Meanwhile, a 16th century German text recommended grinding fennel seeds and combining them with almond oil to create a soothing balm. Some treatments were less natural, like a recipe calling for the poisonous substance white lead, which when ingested can lead to kidney or heart failure, seizures, and even death. White lead may have been used because of its white color, which could help block the sun's rays, or because of its drying properties, which may have seemed beneficial for sunburn. But whether these treatments were effective against the sun or not, they weren't always good for your health. Medieval people weren't the first to try and protect themselves from the sun. While medieval women of higher status enjoyed the luxury of trying to maintain a pale complexion, their attempts at skincare sometimes took a dangerous turn. And while sun protection was important, medieval people were also concerned about fire protection. In addition to fire, medieval people also had to deal with pesky insects. If insects weren't enough, though, there was also the problem of snakes. All these pests were not only annoying, but also represented another thing medieval people had to worry about: death. It wasn't just farm work that led to danger, though. Sadly, drowning wasn't the only way people died during the summer months. Between the heat, the fires, the insects, and the plagues, you might think that the summer was a terrible time to be alive in the Middle Ages, but most of these threats were actually preventable. So what was it really like to experience summer in the Middle Ages? Speaking of summer, I hope you're enjoying this one.